Coming up on episode 21 of Create If Writing. Man versus technology, it's a real thing, especially when you're writing on technology and not in a notebook. For me, it just seemed like an impossibility.
I can't go back to sleep, it's almost light.
And then another week went by, and then another week went by, and then I got an email where she said that everybody passed.
One by one the stars were disappearing from the horizon.
Hello and welcome to Create If Writing. This is episode 21, and it's the first time in like 6 episodes that I'm just talking. I don't have a guest to interview today, and it's kind of refreshing, mostly because it takes less editing. I actually really love talking to people, so it's not refreshing in that sense because it's really fun to talk to people, but it does take at least an extra hour or two to edit the interviews down and get them kind of in the shape that I want them. So I'm both happy and sad this week to be talking just to you. I want to mention, if you have not listened to the past 6 episodes, they have been really, really fantastic. Some really amazing guests have come on. I talked with Aaron Mankey from Lore, and if you are not listening to Lore, this is a perfect month to do so. It's the month of October, and he usually does an episode every other week of the Lore podcast, which is all about folklore and scary stories and myths and monsters and men. It's fantastic. And he usually does every other week. So October, because, Halloween month, he did one every single week. So it's a great month to go listen to the Lore podcast. I also interviewed, and this is not in order because, I don't remember when things happened, but Katie Kremitzos from Biz Women Rock. And congrats, Katie, on just having a new baby, which was super inspiring to get to see, some of those pictures. She talked about Facebook groups, and I've seen the pictures because she has an awesome Facebook group, the Biz Women Rock Facebook group, where she both shares awesome business content and also very personal things. I've seen the pictures of her baby and heard about her birth story, and it's just really neat. So she talks about that and then demonstrates in the Facebook group the very things that she talked about in our interview. So if you have a Facebook group or you're considering it, definitely hit up that interview. And then Maritza Parra came and talked about list building and how she made $30,000 on a list of 800 people. So that was pretty insane. You definitely don't want to miss that one. Then we've got Damian Farnworth from Copy Blogger, and his podcast is called Rough Draft, and it is so much fun. And we just talked about all kinds of stuff. I feel like the last few interviews, especially with Damian and Paul Jarvis, were much more of conversations. And so that was a lot of fun talking to him about creativity and what's new and finding your filter. So that was really exciting. And then Paul Jarvis came on the very last episode, and we talked about email lists and particularly his email, the Sunday Dispatch, which goes out on Sundays, and how he keeps reader engagement and what he does and when he deletes people. And it was really fun to hear kind of how he handles his email list and kind of get behind the scenes with a bigger list and what that looks like for him. And then, of course, I had Darren Rouse from ProBlogger, and that was fantastic because I've been a fan of Darren's. I think I've been reading his blog since, my early days of blogging. And so it was really fantastic to get to talk to him. So I have loved this last set of interviews that I've done. And really, in fact, I've just enjoyed all the interviews I've done. But these last 6 have been particularly fun for me. And so I'm really glad to be back with you guys, coming back weekly and not skipping out on episodes like I did over the summer when things went crazy. And actually, speaking of that, today we're going to be talking about obstacles to getting your work done. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about my publishing journey and then also give you guys a few very specific conflicts that may keep you from getting your work done. So first, a couple more things. I just wanted to say I'm going to be doing a giveaway this week. And as I'm recording, I think it's October 27th. I'm terrible with dates, but this is the last week of October. I'm going to be doing a giveaway this week. So you better sign up for my email list because it's only for my email subscribers. And if you go to createifwriting.com, you cannot miss the sign up forms because they're everywhere. And if you do miss them, shoot me an email because I need to know if things aren't working correctly. But it should be very easy for you to sign up right there. And what you will get is the Create If Quick Fix, which comes out every Wednesday and has links that I have found helpful for writing and social media and blogging and just inspiring creativity. So that's a really helpful email, I think, weekly. And I've gotten some great feedback. So thank you guys who are already subscribed. And if you aren't subscribed, go subscribe because I'm giving something away to you. I also am going to be having another live training coming up, and I don't know the date yet, but you do not want to miss this one. And I'll make sure that you hear about it through my email list. So again, get on there. But I am going to be going through the different email service providers and helping you figure out which is the right one for you. And I'm going to have a special guest on there. And I will be talking about ConvertKit, which is what I am moving to. I'm in the process. I've already got it and I'm setting it up and I'm just beyond excited, but I'm going to be talking mostly about Mad Mimi, MailChimp, and then ConvertKit. And I'll be having a special guest and there'll be a special package. So again, you don't want to miss it. Sign up for the email list. And if you're on my email list, you will hear about the live trainings. But if you want to make sure you don't miss the live trainings, there's also a place right on creativewriting.com where you can sign up for that list to make sure every time there's a live training, you're getting that reminder the day of and the hour before. Because I don't send that to all of my subscribers just because I don't want to bombard you with 80 emails a week. So if you want to make sure that you're getting that live training update, then do be sure you sign up for the live training as well. So with that said, I want to dive in now to talking about obstacles and things that stand in the way of getting our creative work done. So my story starts back when Rob and I had been married about, I guess, a year and a half, and he had been working at the YMCA, and that job just was horrendous. So he had left and was now teaching school, and I really struggled to find a job after we got married. I had done youth ministry in a church before, which did not adequately prepare me for any kind of job at all. And I mean, it did, but it didn't. It didn't look good on resumes. It gave me a lot of cool skills, but I didn't know how this translated to kind of the real business world. I had an English degree, but I hadn't done anything with it. So I didn't have experience editing or doing any of those kinds of practical skills that people were looking for. So I was really struggling with what to do with my life. And I really decided I wanted to go back to grad school and get my MFA in fiction, which is your Master's of Fine Art in Fiction. In my undergrad, I had taken 2 semesters of creative writing with Claudia Emerson, who was, I don't even know where to begin with her, but she won the Pulitzer Prize a few years ago for her book of poetry called Late Wife. And she very sadly just lost a battle with cancer last year. And she was probably the most influential person on my writing career because when I took this class with her, I took 2 semesters. I think the first was intro and the second was fiction. I didn't take poetry because I'm pretty terrible at poetry, but she pulled me aside and just said, you've got to go to school. You need to do this. This is your thing. This is beautiful. I love your writing. And was just such a champion for my work that when I didn't know what I wanted to do and I really started getting back into writing and wondering if I could do it, I thought of what she said. And I decided I wanted to go to grad school. So the process of getting to grad school was a whole other story because getting into a school for MFA is insane and really, really difficult. And it just isn't for everybody. And I'd like to talk more about that in a later episode. But for now, I will say that it was a very long process that cost a bunch of money to send in all these applications. And Rob and I had to, deal with making that big decision together as a couple. And that was kind of the first big decision we had to make that was difficult as a married couple. And so that was really good for us. And we ended up going to University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And that was where Claudia had also gone. And I'm pretty sure that she basically sent them a letter that was like, let her in or else. Which was great because that's really where I wanted to go. And so my class was, there were 7 other fiction writers and I think 6 or 7 poets. And so it was a very, very small class. And we were all together for a few of the classes. And then we had, every Thursday was workshop day. And we had like a 3-hour workshop where each week, I think it was 1 to 2 people would have a piece up. And we would all talk about it in front of them. And you couldn't talk back or defend your work. You just had to listen to what people had to say about it. And then you got a chance at the very end to kind of, ask questions or clarify or cry out loud or whatever you wanted to do. And then we all went to the bar and it was an amazing 2 years of time. And one of the goals that I told Rob when I went in is that I wanted to come out with a novel written because your second year, you basically didn't really take classes. You had an intense mentorship. And I had one with Craig Nova, who is an amazing novelist. And I also worked with Michael Parker as well and Lee Zacharias. And so they were also very influential on the work I was doing. But my main, mentorship was with Craig. Actually, I think it was with Craig one semester and Michael Parker the other, both of whom were fantastic novelists. And I would highly recommend any of their books to you. So while working with the two of them, I worked on a novel. And most of in fact, actually everybody else in my class, the other 6 people, were doing compilations of short stories. And I had, I did come out with a few short stories I really did love after the first year. And one that I read at my thesis reading, because it's a little bit harder to read from a novel at your thesis reading. So I did read from a short story. But the second year, I worked the entire year on a novel. And I did come out with a finished novel. It was a really terrible first draft of a novel, but it was a novel nonetheless. And then I spent the next year editing that novel and getting ready to send it out. So I was also pregnant. So I finished graduate school. We moved right back to Texas, and I got pregnant a few months later. And so while I was pregnant, I finished up the novel. I had that sort of impending sense of needing to get it done. And I sent the finished work to Craig to read, and he liked it a lot and sent me the name of an agent that he also thought would like it, which was great because that allowed me to sort of jump the line in a lot of ways. A quick note about that. It is very, very difficult to get published these days with a traditional publisher because you have to go through a very specific set of things that you have to do. You have to find an agent first. Most publishers will not look at anything that you send. They used to call it, I guess they probably still call it over the transom. And they don't really look at that anymore. You need to have an agent. And there probably are a few publishers, I know I've seen links, who will look at something without an agent, but most of them will not. So you have to find an agent. So that involves sending query letters, sending a sample sometimes. It depends. Every agent wants different things. So you have to figure out who represents what, who wants what form do they want you to send, and then send the specific kind of query letter with or without a manuscript or a synopsis, whatever they ask for. You have to be really specific to that agent or the agency. It's really difficult. And anybody who has written and tried to publish knows just what I'm talking about. And then after you have an agent, then the agent will, work with you on getting everything into shape, and then will help submit those to the publishers. And then you wait again. So there's just a lot of different parts where you're waiting in the process. And I loved one of the things also about grad school is that I wanted to go because I wanted to finish a novel, but I also knew that the contacts I had there would be invaluable. And that does not mean that if you go to grad school, you're going to automatically get an agent, because it's not that kind of nepotism. Craig made no promises to me to do that. And it was really because he liked my work enough and believed in it enough that he had someone in mind that he thought would be a good fit. So I'm very fortunate to have that, but it also was not just a luck kind of thing. And, I think sometimes, in this world, it is sometimes the people and it is the benefit of going to school and working hard and having those contacts. But you can also have that and not get an agent. And I could also have sent it to the agent and she wouldn't have liked it. So I'll move on now, but I just wanted to kind of explain a little bit about how that worked, because that's not a perk of going to grad school. You're not going to automatically get an agent. It just, again, it's a mix of things, but hard work is one of those things. And then having a contact who, felt strongly enough about my work to pass it on was a fantastic byproduct and a result of me knowing Craig and going to school there. So I was really glad to be able to have that opportunity. So I sent the work to this agent and she loved it and had some suggestions. And so I remember, I'm not sure actually if I was doing the edits I think I was doing the edits after having a baby. So I was working on the novel when Sawyer was a baby after the agent had a few suggestions. And so we whipped the novel into the shape that she had great suggestions. So we whipped the novel into shape. And then the whole publishing industry basically shuts down from Thanksgiving until after New Year's. And so we kind of had hit that point. Sawyer was born in May, and I think I was working on it in that period. It could have been later, but in any case, we sent the novel out in January to publishers, and she emailed me back and said, everybody loves the novel. I've gotten great feedback. Now I'm just waiting for an offer. And then another week went by, and then another week went by, and then I got an email where she said that everybody passed. And we talked on the phone about it. And basically, I mean, in essence, it was kind of one of those things that the publishers had really good feedback, but nobody wanted to buy it. And part of that is, probably that I was a first-time author. Back then, the word platform was not even mentioned. There was never a question of, did I have an email list? Did I have Twitter? Did I have any of these things? This was about 2008, 2009 that we were doing this. So that's how different the world is today, because it's very, very different. So it wasn't for lack of a platform. It was really just because I had a literary young adult novel that was a little bit darker and a little bit more of a risk. Like, it was not one of I think it had a very good plot, but it was not like one of those page turner, like dime a dozen type of novels that's just focused on story. So it was a little bit different than, something that may have sold well or may not have. Is a little bit more of a risk. I was a first time author, so a little bit more of a risk. So, and actually at this point, I think I forgot to mention my first agent in the midst of all this got pregnant and decided to leave the agency. And so she sent my name to another agent. And so she was now representing me. So I think this was actually the second agent that had sent my work out. And so she did say that she talked me up to the different people that really were excited about my work. And they said they wanted to see more from me, that they really liked my writing. And this is a good thing to hear, because people don't say that in publishing. It's pretty cutthroat. If they like you, they say they like you. And if they don't, they say they don't, or they just pass. So it's a great encouragement to hear that they like your work, but it also is really frustrating to hear that they love your work and are not going to buy it because you're just dead in the water. So my only really hope for that book is that if I ever get other things published and they do well, someone would pick that up, because at this point, it's kind of just dead. Or I could self-publish it, but that's another whole story. I'm not really interested in doing that right now with my fiction. So then I started I'd already been working on my second book, and my agent had pitched that idea to some of the publishers, and they really wanted to hear it and see it. And at this point, I think I was having another baby, and then my agent had a baby, and she decided to quit, but her husband was an agent. And so she talked me up enough to him that he and I were in talks and are still in talks, where he has not said that he'll represent me, but he wants to see my next manuscript. And I have been, quote unquote, working on that next manuscript for, I think, 4 years. Now, I'm a pretty fast writer. I've actually not been working on the novel for that long. And the reason is because, well, there's a couple of reasons. The main reason for me is that when it comes to writing fiction, I really have to go deep. I really have to dive down in and kind of roll around in the mud with my characters and be there, and my head has to go into that place. And I tend to write darker fiction. And so it's just a really big change in dynamic from being around my children during the day and having kind of the way that I need to be around them, and then going into this darker place where my characters live and living with them. And it's really, really difficult for me to do. I know writers all through the ages have done this, or maybe not through the ages, but through the last couple of centuries have done this. But for me, it just seemed like an impossibility. And so I've really enjoyed the outlet of blogging as writing, and I've self-published some devotional type books and nonfiction books, which are easier for me because, again, I don't have to go to sort of that dark place and let the characters kind of get out of my head and kind of be real for me there. So, but I also think there is a bit of an excuse in that I'm kind of gun shy, because it was so difficult to go from hearing my agent say, I'm just waiting for an offer, everybody loves the book, to we're not publishing it and we really don't have a reason why. There was no real reason that they gave. So that was just, it makes me gun shy. I do want to write. I have, a book that's 90% complete, and I have other books kind of lined up behind it that I want to write, but it makes me gun shy because there's this sense of, once the once bitten, twice shy type thing. Now I'm using all the terrible analogies, but once that's happened to you, it is really difficult to want to jump back in. And I could add another terrible analogy and cliched metaphor and say, jump back in the saddle. So we'll just use them all and break all the rules, and it's terrible. But it is hard to want to do that again and to go through the process of sending it again, and you just have no choice over the outcome. So that's kind of my story of where my publishing journey has been and led me to. So I still have an agent. I touched base with him this year, who is willing to read my work, which again is a huge saving of time and everything else. But I don't have the work finished and I keep not having the work finished. So there's no guarantees that he'll even love it when he gets it. And there's no guarantees if he loves it that anyone else will love it. And there's no guarantees even if they love it that somebody will publish it. So I know that going in, and persevering through that has been a challenge for me, combined with the challenge of being a stay-at-home mom with 4 small children and trying to kind of figure out that balance for myself. So I wanted to talk about obstacles because I've revealed 2 of my obstacles, the first being my children and being a stay-at-home mom and sort of what that entails for my brain, more than my time, because I can make time. I stay up late every night and do things and get a lot done, but it's more a mental and emotional thing. And then the other one is the excuse of fear, which is really just I need to just get over that and push on through. So I wanted to talk through obstacles that you might have. And as I started thinking about this, I started thinking about the 4 main literary conflicts. And if you remember this from, recently, or probably more likely back in your school days, there's man versus man versus nature, man versus society, and man versus self. And so those all came to mind, and I was kind of trying to figure out how to fit in the obstacles I was thinking of into those 4 conflicts, but I actually created new conflicts that probably could fit in those categories. But I'm going to separate them out for the sake of this being my podcast, and that's what I'm going to do. So here are some conflicts, and I would love to know what are the conflicts that keep you from getting your creative work done. So the first one is going to be man versus relationships. And this I know would fit under man versus man. But for me, this is where my main conflict of raising children lies, because it's not necessarily because of them. They're not, taking my computer and running off with it or those kinds of things. They're not taking up all of my time, but it's an emotional thing that happens because of my relationship with my children. So man versus relationship might be a big one for you. You might also be a parent that's staying home with children, or you work all day and then you come home and need to be with your children, and then the time just goes. So it may be man versus relationship, or perhaps your conflict is man versus distractions. Anybody got distractions in here? I have to say my number one is Facebook. Anytime I open my computer and Facebook is open, 2 hours later, I'm like, what am I doing? Where have I been? What am I looking at? And, I do love to connect with people on Facebook. I do use it as a tool. I have a Facebook group for creative writing, which you should find and join if you're not in there already. But mostly I just get sucked into looking at what other people are doing with their lives and watching videos and reading people's posts. And then 2 hours later, there I am. So maybe your conflict is man versus distractions, or a very related one in my case, this is man versus technology, but this is a little different. Earlier in the summer, my man versus technology conflict came when my computer totally crashed and died, and I lost all kinds of work. I lost books, I lost podcast interviews, and thankfully a huge, wonderful friend of mine, Danny Nguyen, who I know from roller derby, fixed the computer. I didn't even know he knew how to do this kind of thing. And he said he kept it on the down low. And oops, now I've outed you. So anybody listening, don't go to Danny with your broken computers. He doesn't want to fix them. He's actually a fantastic photographer, and I'll link to his site in the show notes just as a thank you. But don't ask him to fix your computer. That was a secret. I'm sorry I let that out, Danny. So that was my man versus technology conflict. I literally lost all my work. So I don't know if you've had anything similar happen to you, like your phone crashing or something dying or losing your work. But, man versus technology, it's a real thing, especially when you're writing on technology and not in a notebook. Another one is man versus ability. And this comes in the form, this is not so much when I'm writing, but more when I'm working on the blog side of things. And I've had several times where I really want to do something with my website and I don't have the ability. And so the conflict is that I have to either hire somebody or find the ability and go on YouTube and figure out how to do something. An example of this is when I started the podcast. I wanted to start a podcast, and as far as ability goes, I had no idea what to do. And I didn't know how to edit. I didn't know how to do any of the things it took to start a podcast, but I had 2 weeks. I wanted to start, and I was going to interview Blaine Hogan, and it was time sensitive, so I had to do it. So I just jumped in with both feet. I watched YouTube videos. I took John Lee Dumas's podcast course, the free podcast course, and I learned things. And if you go back and listen to the first episodes, oh my goodness, my sound editing was terrible. I didn't know what I was doing. I just messed around in Audacity, and more of the time probably screwed things up than I fixed them. So that's man versus ability, and you can overcome that one as well as most of these you can overcome, like turn off Facebook for the technology. I can't get rid of my kids. So man versus relationship is a really different kind of one. But for me, overcoming that means figuring out what it looks like to write fiction and have children. So I'm working on that. Another one is man versus busyness. And this is kind of like distractions, but not so much because you don't always have control over your busyness. I mean, yes, you do, but a lot of times you will find that your life fills up with these events, and some of them you could choose not to do. But if you don't want to be a hermit, if you have kids and you want them to do any kind of activities, if you belong to a church or an organization or anything else, you know how easy it is to find that your time just fills up so quickly. So busyness, it's a thing. You know this. I know this. Man versus the bank. This is another conflict. And it's not clearly the bank itself, but I know for some people, there's just this real need to work to make money. And so your creative work may or may not cover those costs. And so man versus the bank, this is the real practical need to provide and to get food on the table and pay the bills and those kinds of things. And that can sometimes stand in opposition of your creative work. And then the last one, which for me is the most central, is man versus self. It's that whole old man versus self conflict. That's one of the 4 main literary conflicts. And this is the big one because this is where our fear lives. This is where our excuses live. This is where we are fighting against ourselves and fighting against those voices telling us that we can't do it, fighting against those voices telling us that we should be afraid to do it, that we might fail, on and on and on. You know, I'm not sure what the voices in your head say, but mine definitely, if I'm listening to them, they're kind of in there quietly and I don't always hear them. They're kind of in there talking to me, whether I acknowledge them or not. But mine a lot of times have to do with that publishing story and how I know in the back of my mind that I could work as hard as I can. I could have positive feedback from my agent. I could have positive feedback from publishers and still not get published, get so close and then not have it come true. So that's in there. So that's man versus self. That's me versus me. So I'm curious to know where you fall in with those conflicts. What are the main conflicts that keep you from your creative work? What are the main conflicts that keep you from getting your passions done, from accomplishing the things that you have on your dreams list and on your goals list and the things that you really, really, really want to see come to fruition? What are the things that hold you back? So I would love for you to go visit the show notes at createifwriting.com/021 to let me know what are the conflicts that you are struggling with. Where on that list do you fall? So now you know where I am in this whole thing, and I am forcing myself to overcome those conflicts next month as I'm doing NaNoWriMo, which is the National Novel Writing Month, where a bunch of crazy people all commit to writing 50,000 words or more during the month of November. And I've committed that. I've signed up. I'm going to do it. And I have work that I want to do. I have my novel I could work on, but they encourage you to do a first draft, and I have another story I want to get out of my head where it's been living. It's backed up because that one novel is 90% done, and I'm struggling to look at that one right now. So we're going to go ahead and do a fresh start. And if you know me, you know I'm really good at starting things and not finishing them, so this just might mean I have 2 novels that are not finished at the end. But in any case, I'm doing it. So I am going to jump past those obstacles of time and fear, and also the relationships. And I'm going to find the time. I'm going to make myself go live with my characters, even if it's only 2 hours a day. 2 hours in the middle of the night, because realistically, that's when it's going to be. So I'd love to know, again, what your obstacles are, what the conflicts are that you are facing for your creative work. I want you to sign up for the email list so that you can be sure to hear about the giveaway I'm doing this week, and then also the really awesome live training I'm going to do that's going to help you figure out which is the right email list provider for you. Because even if you've got one right now, you may want to switch after you hear what I have to say about the different providers and my experience with them over this past year and the years past. So thank you so much again for listening. I really love my listeners and my readers of the blog, and I hope that you come and connect personally with me in the Create If Writing podcast Facebook group. And also just, again, reach out to me via Twitter at KikiMojo, or send me an email, kirsten@kirstenoliphant.com. I'd love to hear from you. I love connecting with my readers and listeners. I keep saying readers because I'm so used to reading, even though right now I'm speaking out loud. You are my listeners, you are my people, and I'm glad that you're here, and I hope that you have an inspired week.